Hello and welcome to another episode of Midierror Meets, where we speak to all sorts of people who work in sound and music. On the show this time, we've got Halina Rice, who is a London-based electronic producer who's known for her incredible expansive sound and fantastic production, as well as the live visuals that go alongside her tracks. Halina's relatively new to the music making world. She studied music production only a few years ago and has since been making waves with her incredible productions and her 3D live shows. You can donate to the podcast. You can support the podcast in a few ways. Just liking it and sharing it and doing all the social media nonsense. You can also donate via PayPal or Ko-fi if you want to support it, and you will get a shout out on an episode, and you will be an inductee into the MIDI Arpeggiation Hall of Fame. But enough of that, let's get on with it. The first thing that I asked Halina was about her musical beginnings.
The first experience I think I had of musical instruments was piano. So both my grandmothers were pianists, not professionally, but they both played the piano. One of them was kind enough to buy our family a piano, and no one else was particularly interested in it. I was for whatever reason, and I think my brother was more into the guitar initially. And he sort of showed me how to work out chords on the piano, I think. So I had sort of two educations. One was I started taking piano lessons, so I studied classically through all the grades as I went through school. But it feels like that was one sort of fairly limited education. And then the other side was, my brother had, for instance, the Beatles guitar chord book. So he didn't have any piano notes in it. It just had the chords written out. Mm-hmm. So I had to figure out how to reinterpret those onto the piano, and my brother kind of explained how things like dominant sevenths worked and augmented chords, etc. So it was a really interesting education in that sense, because all I wanted to do was to know how to recreate those songs. For me, I think always it's been about understanding the engine in what's going on inside of a piece of music. So why is it that chord moving from one place to another? Why is that moving? So if I hear something on the radio, for instance, I would try and work it out by ear, having mastered sort of my way around the chords and the chord structures, etc. But often it would just teach me about so they're moving from this chord to that chord, but then the bass line is just descending one note by one note. That's really clever. So I think that's what I would say. So on one hand, it's been useful for me later in life to have the grounding of a classical piano education. But on the other side, where my actual impetus to compose, produce, etc. comes from, is the other side, which is almost forgetting some of the theoretical side and doing it by ear and trying to understand how emotionally things are put together. I'd say that's sort of an encapsulation of the technical side of it.
Yeah, I think the Beatles it's really nice to see how established songs that you know and love, melodically, and see how they're actually made when you play them yourself, isn't it? When you put your own hand on a piano and play a really incredible track and realise that it's not actually like world-beatingly difficult. This is something that is possible.
Yeah, exactly that. Sometimes you just think, is it literally just that? They just move from there, but because they would flatten that chord, it all sounds super modern and different. So, yeah, it is magic, really.
Yeah, and what sort of sounds were you listening to, or music were you listening to growing up?
I remember hearing, without knowing what it was, Rhapsody in Blue on a television programme, and just saying to my dad, what's that? And he knew the piece of music, which was a piece of luck, and then just saying, please can I have the piano music for that? I still can't play it. But again, it's just the percussions, harmonies, chord structure, and how quickly it can move between sort of different areas of different sort of melodic structures is just really, I just found really, really incredible at the time, although I probably wouldn't have verbalised it like that. I just thought it was a nice piece of music.
Yeah, yeah.
And then on the other side, my brother and sister are quite a bit older than me, and a lot of it was, I sort of didn't have the gumption to go and buy records myself. I'd sort of listen to what was hanging around the house. So, and they were into things. So it was like the first Peter Gabriel albums that he produced before So post Genesis pre. Am I writing that? Yes, pre-So, which are full of weirdest sound design and it's sort of quite prog titles like Moribund the Burgermeister, and so things like things that I think are still actually quite progressive or they're quite cutting edge in sound design. I think even today, and a bit weird, bit alternative, I guess, and also things like the Cocteau Twins. My sister had their albums. And there was an album that was very popular at the time, I think quite seminal for a lot of producers later. It was called Les Mystères des Voix Bulgaires, which is, I think, the Bulgarian TV state choir.
Wow.
But I think it's weird because nowadays I hear lots of people quote the influence of that album. I have no idea how it got into our house or where that came from. It was really non-Western, the tonality of it.
Right.
And they sing some notes you don't expect, and some of them are they clash, but in a really beautiful way.
Wow, definitely. Yeah. It's interesting about what you're saying about the discordant like notes or elements in that Bulgarian core track, and like studies have been done on sort of tribal people who don't recognise the same discord in music that we do as Western listeners. Yeah, and isn't that? Yeah, I just think it's really really funny that we're sort of. I want to use the word program, but it sounds too cynical. But we're sort of accustomed to certain things sounding harmonic to our ears, and then in other cultures, it's they have very different like rules and things happening in their music.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's so many modern production methods as well, which can help you challenge. Probably accepted. So rather than having to just play, from a keyboard through whatever synth, just the fact there's lots of ways of warping sound, and so a tool I'm fond of using is pull stretch.
Yes.
If you're aware of it, yeah. So extreme sound stretch, effectively, and it sort of seems like something that's a bit word of mouth. Like someone goes pull stretch to you, pull stretch, and then you pass it on to some other people, and. So
you're always not sure that that's actually what it's called when you go, have you tried pull stretch?
Yeah,
they're not saying that right. That's not what something's actually called.
It's actually a stretching made by someone called Paul.
Yeah.
You put in a voice, and because you're moving, your voice is organic and it's moving between different notes. When you stretch it, you suddenly hear this sort of weird where you're missing the notes and you're moving up. Because you can stretch it, for a year if you want to.
I think he does one that's Paul's Extreme Stretch, and you can make a sample last 1 billion years.
Yes. Which,
don't export that file for God's sake. Do not press export.
So yeah. So it's one of the multiple doing. I just think that there's so much stuff that you can use now that just pushes and distorts and changes and starts to challenge some of that, and if you then just sort of lose sight of the kind of chromatic keys, then you start to create things and they're only created once. It's sort of a classic thing. You start with a sample and you grow attached to that sample, and nothing ever sounds like that sample. Just the harmonics that occur at that moment in that particular piece of audio,
definitely
that evoke something in you, and you can't make it. It just kind of happens.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the Firestarter by the Prodigy.
Right.
The vocal for that track was supposedly, I say supposedly, Liam Howlett has said it was recorded in a hotel room one night as a guide track with Keith Flint shouting all of the Firestarter lyrics, and they went into a studio and they loved what he did and it really worked with the track, and they went into a studio and tried and re-record the vocals with all the gubbins you've got, and they kept the original vocal in the track because there was just something about that
that
the
particular.
quality of the recording. It's funny, isn't it? Because like producers like Phil Spector were notoriously perfectionist and maddeningly minute about the details, and he created incredible music that way. But yeah, it's funny to think there is just something within some recordings, like, well, I'm sure you've got recordings from years ago you've done with other people, and there's just something about the character of that recording that you did with somebody that was in the room, and it's difficult to replicate.
I saw this producer speak, and she was talking about how she looks back at her early tracks, and they're not very well finessed, she felt, in her opinion, but they had the energy of that time in them. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's obviously it's sort of encapsulating a particular time and feeling. So maybe it's okay sometimes for things to be. I mean, it sort of brings to mind what is it that you like about a track, and sometimes what you like about a track is not the quality of the track, it's what it represents to you. I do still have a view on organic social media. I think this comes from the other side of my life, which is that for many years I worked running as a sort of marketing director and digital director for large retailers. So doing that for a living, you trial and error across multiple routes, multiple times, and you're expected to know or to report very accurately on data and to justify what works and doesn't work. And it's interesting coming into the music industry as a sort of a newbie and gradually getting a sense of, in a totally different guise as an artist and as the product person, not the person who is helping a product come along, but the actual product person. You suddenly get a view. Literally, I didn't understand anything about the music industry until about sort of 5 or 6 years ago. After I effectively took a course at Point Blank Music School, which happened to unfold into me committing my life to producing music. But coming in from another industry makes you realise that it's full of freelancers, effectively, small independent freelancers who are often quite young and who are being expected, particularly in today's world, which appears to be very accessible. You can distribute, you can do your own marketing through social media, etc., to run a small company very quickly with zero investment. Everyone expects that they don't have to invest money into it, and it just felt to me that a lot of people were running around being sold a myth that if they did organic social media enough, they would attain the same fame as Lewis Capaldi, as if Lewis Capaldi's only reason that he's famous is because he's funny on social media, and I think that's just not true. And I think that myth is just being propounded to lots of people because actually no one knows where to start, and it's really, really difficult for anyone to get traction because, like, when going back to your example of having the record, the point is when you had that record, if you managed to persuade people to spend money on you to get into a studio to do all the distribution routes that were relevant in, say, like the 80s and 90s, at that point there'd probably be people ready to bet also some marketing money on you and to help propel you forward. Whereas now people are saying, you can just do this on your own and you don't need a label. What they're saying is you can do this on your own and you should be able to do it without anyone investing any money in you also. And I think for the majority of people it's just not true. And also when you're told that people got there just on organic social media, a lot of it's PR nonsense.
Arctic Monkeys is a good example, isn't it? You wonder whether MySpace, everyone just knew MySpace was how they did it, and then sort of, everyone starts to see that formula. Yeah, I think the problem is with these well-trodden social media lines of like how to promote your stuff, and everyone perpetuating this is how this person did it and this is how you do it. When those lines get so well trodden, everyone just gets immune to like how it works, and then there's another one that's like a different way of doing it.
But often you're part of a community and you're part of a movement and you're part of a whole network of people. And I think, again, coming into music, it's very clear that it's quite a small world, and networks are very powerful ways for people to move forward, possibly more so than social media. I would have said, and then
Mm.
and again, I just think this has just been true for forever for any form of entertainer that's become famous. Is there's a story about how there's a fun story that people like to tell, and it's always good to have that story and then say the word allegedly afterwards.
Yeah, I need to start saying allegedly more often.
Yeah.
The music is really the primary
Yes.
thing, isn't it? The
Yeah.
music is the main thing. And I do believe, and maybe it's like an ideal, like an idealism or something, but I do believe if you make really good music, then people will come. Maybe not in your lifetime. I don't know. You know, we all know of artists and people who like posthumously lauded, but yeah, I do believe that. I always say to people. I mean, I've not really got much experience of releasing music, but I always just say like, don't be distracted by like the promo and the marketing behind what you're doing. Work on the music. Make sure the music's as good as it can be. And then you're in a good, you're in a good position to go forward.
Yeah, the rest is window dressing, really. You'd hope.